Good morning, everyone. My name is Jaideep Prabhu. I'm a professor of marketing and of Indian business at the Judge Business School, and it's my great pleasure to be talking to Dr. Yusuf Hamied this morning. As all of you know, Dr. Hamied is the chairman of Cipla, one of India's leading pharmaceutical companies. What you may not know is that he studied in Cambridge in the 50s. He did his BA and his PhD in chemistry here in Cambridge. And I believe he still uses his notes from those days when he's synthesizing new drugs. He'll tell us if that's true or not. He went back to India after Cambridge, and he took Cipla, his father's company, to new heights. He's particularly well known for taking on the large pharmaceutical companies from the West in providing generic AIDS drugs and treatments for other ailments, primarily affecting people in lower income countries. In 2011, the New York Times wrote, Dr. Yusuf Hamied, chairman of the Indian drug giant Cipla, electrified the global health community a decade ago when he said he could produce cocktails of AIDS medicines for $1 a day, a fraction of the price charged by branded pharmaceutical companies. That price has since fallen to 20 cents per day, and more than 6 million people in the developing world now receive treatment, up from little more than 2,000 in 2001. For these achievements and many others, he has received awards: Padma Bhushan, Fellow of the Indian National Science Academy, Honorary Fellow of the Royal Society, and so on. But most importantly, he is a friend of Cambridge. So, Dr. Hamied, I wanted to start by asking you, what was it like to come as an Indian to Cambridge in the 1950s? What was it like then?
In the 50s, don't forget, it was just after the war. And it was a very, very difficult period to come here. Indians could only come here if we applied through the Indian government. And you had to go through the Indian High Commission to come here. I was lucky that I got in by fluke. It was actually a stroke of luck. The professor of chemistry in 1953 was a gentleman called Professor Alexander Todd. And he happened to come to India, and it just happened that my father and I met him. And one of the questions my father asked him, that Professor Todd, what are the minimum qualifications to get into Cambridge? And he replied, if we find the candidate suitable, we take him. So my father said, I'd like to send my son to Cambridge. So then he turned his attention to me. I was 17. How old are you, young man? I said, 17, sir. When will you be 18? I said, in July 1954. All right. You're admitted to Christ College in October 54. And that's how I got into Cambridge. But one thing which you would not like to hear was, at that time, the Indian government, to students coming to Oxford or Cambridge, used to get a grant of £600 a year. And I used to keep an account book. I gave one to the library of Christ College. My first year account book, living in college, eating in college, university fees, college fees, the total from October 54 to June 55 was £325. Now I ask the university that when you're charging £30,000 for an Indian to come to study here in Cambridge, what do you do with all that money? Anyway, that is apart. So we've had good... this place is very nostalgic because just standing there in 1955 was a group of Indians like we are here today with Pandit Nehru. He had visited Cambridge in 55. Don't forget, he was a student here in 1905, 1906. So he came and visited us here in 1955. in 55.
And you said you had some other distinguished.
Other was Manmohan Singh, was a colleague of ours in the mid-50s. He was from St. John's College, but more senior to me. And then Amartya Sen was been here. One or two past presidents of India have been here. Amartya Sen, Manmohan Singh. And let's forget the past for a moment. You have three very, very distinguished Indians currently in Cambridge. And these are Professor Partha Das Gupta, who is a world authority on biodiversity. Then you have Professor Venki Ramakrishnan, who is a Nobel Prize winner, 2009. And the third is likely to get the Nobel Prize very soon, another chemist, Professor Shankar Bala Subramaniam. So these are the three current things. But what I would like to tell, I'm now digressing because there's so many Indians whom I'm meeting for the first time. The relationship that I have with Cambridge currently and with England, because a lot of you boys and students will go back to India. One thing that I think that I like and which can be expanded, and which I do, is currently 3 Cambridge academics come to India each year and lecture in India at various institutions. I can tell you more details later on. And 3 Indian academics come to Cambridge each year for about a month to update their knowledge of what they teach in India. But that is not one of the things that I really like the best. My best project, which I think I want to share with all of you, is what I do with the Royal Society of Chemistry. A few years ago, actually not a few years ago, 10 years ago, we started this project in India of teaching teachers chemistry. And I'm cutting a long story short because there's too much to say. From 2014 to 2019, we trained 25,000 teachers throughout India, half in English and half in their own vernacular language, to teach chemistry at the school level and at the university level. Then comes, it was a 5-year project. Then came 2019. They said, will you like to extend this project? I said, no. I'll only extend it if you incorporate and change the subject now to science. So chemistry, physics, maths, biology. They said, we don't know how to do that. I said, go to the Royal Society of Physics or Maths and do that. And you'll be interested to know that from 2019 till date, an additional 20,000 teachers have been taught what to teach and how to teach science. And this is something I'd like to share with all of you, that what can India do positively with Cambridge? And this is something I would like to share with Sir David and Lord Simon here. How do we educate teachers? Because what I'm finding today, that 9 out of 10 Indians who come abroad to study don't go back home.
So speaking about going back home, I wanted to ask you that. You went back from Cambridge to India.
Yes.
What was that like? And how was India like then?
It was very, very tough and very difficult. Genuinely. It was the era of what was called in India the license Raj. There was no foreign exchange at all. You could not leave the country, nothing. It wasn't, I'll go back to 1939. Because in 1939, Mahatma Gandhi came and visited Cipla, my company. And in retrospect, why did he come? At that time, in 1939, the war was about to start, the Second World War, and medicines had stopped coming to India because the Suez Canal was virtually shut at that time. And most of the medicines in India at that period were being imported. So he came to us and said, I would like you to supply, the British have been to see me, that Mahatma Gandhi said, and if India cooperated with England in the war effort, they would consider giving India independence. So my father turned around and asked him, what has that got to do with us? He said, medicines have stopped coming to India. I want you to produce medicines for the war effort. And that's how Cipla came up in life, by producing anti-malarials, drugs for trauma, drugs for dysentery and diarrhea for the war, for the Indo-British Army, because we were fighting then on the Burma front and the Eastern Front. And that's how we came up. But what it taught us, and what I like to tell all of you, it taught us two lessons. One was self-reliance, and one was self-sufficiency. And these two words, till today, are the backbone of my existence. And how can India be self-reliant and self-sufficient even now in the future?
So could I ask you then to reflect on how India has changed since those days? What's it like now to run Cipla in India?
This is a very difficult question. I think we've grown. India has matured a lot, but we still have a long way to go. I still feel this foreign stigma over us. Particularly, I'm now talking healthcare, because that is my line, that Indian doctors and medical profession still have that foreign, whatever is foreign is better. That will take still a long time to, maybe another generation to get over that.
And what about Cambridge? You've come back to Cambridge so many times. How's Cambridge changed?
I come back to Cambridge. Cambridge hasn't changed very much, except every time I come here, I feel very nostalgic. When I entered this place, I think in a room that side, they used to have a snooker table in the 50s. And we used to come to the Union to play snooker, not to listen to talks here.
But surely Cambridge has also changed in terms of science and technology in application, like companies, the whole Cambridge phenomenon. You have Indian companies like Dr. Reddy setting up here. What do you think of that phenomenon, the commercialization of science?
I think one of the things I was going to talk to you a little later, maybe if I have a moment, is the transition from academia to industry. That is a very, very important. I've given many, many talks on that subject, particularly in India. And would you like me to say a few words on that?
That would be excellent.
But I've got it written down here.
I wanted to ask you about that.
Pardon?
How can Cambridge contribute to India going forward? And that would be a great topic for you to speak about.
No, there are two things. One is, in which areas do we want to grow? And I sincerely believe that if there is technology available here, how can it be imparted to India? In whatever area, whether it's economics, like for example, Partha Das Gupta, we've asked him to come to India to start a division on biodiversity. I think India requires that very urgently. All that is fine. But my plea to all of you here is, how many of you will go back to India and do what India requires. And today I'm noticing that among those who left India 10 years and 15 years ago, the number that are coming back to India, more are coming back now after spending 10 years, 15 years abroad. My only suggestion to you is don't come back to India empty-handed. And I learned that from my late father, that when he finished his degree in Germany, he stayed back in Germany for 6 months and learned how to make soap, learned how to make leather goods, learned how to make medicines, you know, in various internships, in various industry, and then came back to India. Come back to India with something positive that you can do. Don't come back empty-handed. That's a plea to youngsters who want to come back.
So I'm being told we only have 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'll give you one. No, I haven't finished yet.
Please go ahead. Please.
Well, because all of you are students here, and I lecture to many students, so there are 4 things that I'd like to tell you. Nothing to do with India and Cambridge, but one is imagination. Is one of the qualities that differentiates people, and in particular, scientists. So one thing to you is imagination. The second one is enthusiasm. The feeling that what you are doing and planning to do in the future is what really matters. So that is enthusiasm. Then you have vision. You must anticipate to try and predict what you are best at and what are your best options for progress in your life. And finally, achievement and success. And this is reached by overall competence, proficiency in many functions, and a balance between them. One has to be jack of many trades and master of a few. There's an old academic joke, because you're all from academia here. There's an old academic joke that I would like to share, and that is that a philosopher is a person who knows less and less about more and more until he knows nothing about everything. Whereas a scientist is a person who knows more and more about less and less until he knows everything about nothing. So my humble suggestion to all of you is that you need to tread a middle path between that of a philosopher and a scientist. Pardon? So this is something I would like to share with all of you as to what we should do.
Wonderful. May I ask, have the audience ask you some questions? I'm sure they're dying to. So would anybody like to ask Dr. Hamied something? Yes, please. Here. Just say who you are and keep your question short.
Sure. Mani Janaki Raman. I work for the London Stock Exchange Group in London. The question I have is around the theme of India Century, but also about the role people can play, about the role Indian students can play, Indian people can play in the large world order, right? Because in a few years' time, India is going to supply 1 out of 5 for the world's global workforce. So how do you see Indians playing a role in terms of bringing our best traits that we Indians possess in terms of shaping the world order?
So how can Indians contribute to the global order, not just India?
I think India today has 1/4 of the world's population. I think we should first worry about ourselves and then look outside to what is happening. I don't know how many of you know the healthcare situation in India. There are over 200 million mental health cases. There are over 200 million cardiac cases. Diabetes is rampant. And I'm a firm, and I can go on the health scene. And I'm a great believer that you require a healthy nation. And for that, you require healthy individuals. And this is something, if you look at the misery and morbidity in India, it is shocking and very, very sad. Every time I go back to India, I feel very sad about it. I think India definitely requires family planning. Now, this is against the Indian government thinking. They don't want family planning. Now, one of the things that Partha told me a few months ago was that the world's population in the next 30 years will increase by 700 million. He said, you know what that does to the world? It increases the ground temperature by a few degrees, 700 additional people. And with that, the likelihood of plants not growing, likelihood of starvation and hunger increases. So I think most of us here should look at a broader picture that we require, at least in India with 1/4 of the world's population. What do we first do in India? And this is something important.
Excellent point. I mean, and we can do good for the world by doing good for Indians.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay. Anyone else would like to ask a question? Please raise your hand. I think we have, let's have a ladies here.
Hello, sir. I'm Tanushree, a third-year PhD in chemistry. My question is more on the drugs which are currently not being made in India. So there are drugs which is required in India but currently not being made. How do we work on that? Because then we have a lot of financial value on those drugs.
Drugs that India needs that are not being made. What would you say about that?
This is a question I raised when I first met Sir David 20 years ago. And this is a question of intellectual property. In healthcare, only two things matter: monopoly and obsolescence. If you have a monopoly in a drug, you have a 20 years freedom. Nobody can compete with you. Your pricing can be anything you want. And I can go on and on that. Then drugs mature and then die, and newer drugs replace them. So in the healthcare area, one has to be very pragmatic on intellectual property. And this is something that I think most of the people here should understand, that what we did in India in 1961, before you all were born, I was instrumental at that time to fight the Indian government to change the intellectual property laws of India. We were following the British laws of 1911. Right up to 1970, we were following the old laws. Britain themselves changed, but India did not change. And we fought with the government of India, and in 1972, India decided that at least in 3 areas, only 3 areas, food, agriculture, and medicines, there would be no product patents. You cannot patent the end product. What you could patent was a process to make it for a period of 7 years only. And that in 1972 opened the floodgates for the Indian pharma industry, and we Indians took up the challenge and the opportunity to produce drugs that were essential abroad but not available in India. And this, from 72, lasted only till 1995, when, due to the Indian government's foolishness or wisdom, They went back to the old system of pre-1972 and reintroduced monopoly. And today we are living, unfortunately, in an age of monopoly. Now, my candid suggestion to at least Indians who, some of you may be in important government positions later on in life, my candid suggestion is the following: that the government should have a group of medical doctors to decide what is essential in the area of medicines. Those drugs in the essential list that are already off patent, we can manufacture. But those drugs that are on that list, covered by patents, what should we do? So I have suggested three things. One, ask the company who has the monopoly for a voluntary license. Suppose they say no. Some of them say yes, by the way. And I can give you many examples. And I'll give you one example very soon. Suppose they say no, then bring in a system of compulsory licensing. By paying a royalty, I am a great believer that science should be suitably rewarded. Nobody wants charity. So you pay a suitable royalty. Did you all know that if you look at the world's top selling 50 drugs today, over 70% are manufactured and made by companies that did not invent them. They're all in-licensed products, startups, etc., etc. So why can't India pay a royalty? I've never been against science, but I've been against monopoly. And this is something that we should look at very, very seriously in the future for India. But yes, ma'am. She wants to ask you a question.
So I am now having to decide between two ladies, and I think I might go with her because she's been giving me instructions.
I'm a ladies' man.
So what I might suggest is you can ask Dr. Hamied your question.
No, ask. Please.
Okay, we have been told that time. Okay. Dr. Hamied, I want to thank you very much for getting us started. A wonderful introduction to the conference.
No, but I would still like to promote one thing.
Yes.
How can you all here develop in Cambridge and India an exchange partnership? I've done it in a very limited way. If that could be expanded, I have a foundation, and I would be more than happy to sponsor virtually indefinitely a liaison between Cambridge and India.
And we know how much you have done for Cambridge over the years,
No,
and I know
nothing. So not in India. That is what I'm saying. What can we do more in India?
That is a wonderful thought to end on. That's a wonderful thought to end on. We want to thank you very much for that, and we look forward to that.